I am your host, Nicole Will, and we're so happy you're here as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside older adults, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversation. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. The majority of older adults over the age of 65 are taking 15 to 18 medications annually. This can lead to an increase in hospitalization, but it also has a cost of nearly $21 billion annually. My guest today is Dr. DeLon Canterbury. He is the founder of GeriatRx. It's a telehealth concierge consulting service that focuses on helping overwhelmed caregivers and clinicians stop their loved ones from being overmedicated. Dr. Canterbury uses genetic drug screening, deprescribing, and health cost-saving strategies. Dr. DeLon Canterbury is a board-certified geriatric pharmacist. As we will hear him share, one of the biggest challenges was when his family experienced the decline of his grandmother and realizing that medication played a role. He never wanted to see his patients or his parents struggling as much as his grandmother did. That is when GeriatRx was founded. Having seen many people suffering from being over-medicated, we talk about his story and his advocacy in pharmacology, the important change that needs to happen in our healthcare industry, and what the concerns are with geriatric pharmacology at the moment, how we can support family caregivers, what does over-medication mean, and what we should look for, how to understand what the root cause of some of these issues are, and where do we start in deprescribing? What are important questions to ask ourselves and our pharmacists? How he is hopeful and what he is seeing in the growing improvement in this space, and how Dr. Canterbury supports professionals, families, and older adults with his holistic and evidence-based approach. Here is my interview with Dr. DeLon Canterbury. Hello, DeLon. We meet again. How are you?
I'm fantastic. What is going on, Nicole? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's so fun to see your face again. We were able to meet at the Care Colloquium, which
Mm.
was so great to have that introduction. How was that experience for you? What did you think about it all?
Oh man, it was so fun. And I mean inspiring, invigorating. I came back with a fresh plate of ideas for my business and how to better support our caregivers. But really the best part was just seeing everyone's passion, meeting people like you, meeting Kim Wider and her crew and seeing the impact and the stories that we all relate to really just resonated, and it just gave me that spark to keep pushing for our caregivers and being that advocate as a pharmacist.
Yeah, it's so good. And I was introduced to what you do, which was new for me, actually. I wasn't aware that that expertise was available, which was so cool that you're able to come alongside those families, older adults, practitioners. I loved when there's a group of us that went out to dinner, and you had said to all of us, which I thought was super cool, what is your need and how I can support you. And we all kind of went around and shared that. That just,
Mhm.
enlightens us. And I think shares what that whole experience was like. Okay, we're in it together. We're going to support each other.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, that's why we're still close, right? That's why we're still in
Mm-hmm.
touch from
Exactly.
really seeing that, caregiving along with what we're doing as entrepreneurs, it takes a village. It takes a community of people to help us get to those goals, help support each other, and really be there just to listen emotionally too. We may be going through some stuff, and it's good to have people unpack that with. So
Yeah.
I think that's the importance of connection.
Me too. It's so why I get up in the morning, right? To have that community and that connection and to be able to share that with everybody else. So thank you. Thank you for being
Yeah,
here.
for
You
sure.
have a personal story with what brought you into advocacy in this realm. Can you share with us what that was for you?
Yeah, most definitely. So, for those who don't know, I am a pharmacist and founder of GeriatRx. And so, we are a telehealth concierge pharmacist service, and we help caregivers and families figure out what the problems are with their loved ones' medication lists. And we're able to advocate on a way that empowers providers and the families to make sound decisions when they're in a bind, or maybe looking at forcing someone into a nursing home, or just at their wits' end. And so for me, I got into this space realizing that pharmacists can do so much with our education and empowering people, that a lot of it started from having my own grandmother who was suffering from mild dementia, and being in a nursing or assisted living facility in Brooklyn, where she inevitably was prescribed one prescription, and it was an antipsychotic. It was completely inappropriate, and it was meant honestly to chemically knock my grandmother out. And so it took us a number of months. In fact, it got so bad with her symptoms. She was irritable, angry, wandering, really couldn't remember who her family members were. It got so bad with her behavioral symptoms that she ended up being kicked out of the nursing home. Right. Yeah, it makes no sense. And so here we are with my parents. I was a college student. I wasn't a pharmacist yet. Having to move her from New York to Atlanta, find a nursing home, find a caregiver, find home health people, childproof the home because she kept wandering. Just a lot of expense and a lot of stress. And we eventually found out, after 4 months of struggling, that it was the prescription. It was the one pill. And it took one pharmacist at a Rite Aid to say, I think this is the cause of your problem. She took the extra time to advocate, not just refill a prescription like we always do, or like I used to do as a pharmacist in retail. But it was her advocacy that really sparked a fire in me, and not just becoming a pharmacist, but in having a voice for our seniors. So I'm like, how many people almost fall through the cracks? How many people don't have that voice? How many people don't even know who to ask? So I felt it upon myself to make the caregiver the forefront of geriatrics and give people that tool and that peace of mind so they can have that clarity.
Yeah, and your experience with that gave you the heart to then want to serve other people, especially older adults and more of the minority community. Is that correct? Because that is who I feel like falls through the cracks and doesn't have the voice to say, "Hey, this isn't right. Here's what I need."
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm a black male and pharmacist, and the numbers are staggering. There actually are studies that show that more Black and Latino patients that fall under my grandma's health conditions are actually overprescribed inappropriate antipsychotics like that. So, to your point, not only in this dementia space, but in general, it's a much harder road. And if you don't have a communicative provider that can relate to the patient, you're going to miss certain conditions or social barriers. And we already have a difficulty navigating as a whole, but those disparities lead to worse outcomes. And so that's a part of my mission as well, as being that voice and giving people that peace of mind from a trusted messenger.
Which is what we need. There's such important change I feel that has to happen in healthcare, and you're being able to do that and make change and create action and giving people tools of what we can speak up about. And I think also it's that encouragement to think really critically about our care, and medications is a big part of that. How much pharmacology do our medical professionals currently have right now? What does that look like?
uh,
Not enough,
It's
right?
it's it's fairly laughable. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fairly laughable. And it's no slight to our clinicians or prescribers, but there is a segment of pharmacology required for med students and to become a doctor, and that usually looks like about 6 weeks, right? Like about 6 weeks, and then you get a little more training as you get into your field. But honestly, you end up kind of just getting comfortable with your favorite drugs to use, and that isn't exactly appropriate for people with different genetic backgrounds, different side effect profiles, different age, because the way we break down drugs changes the older we get. And so using your favorites isn't going to always work. And this is why pharmacists are the caregiver's secret weapon, because we literally have a doctorate in understanding the pharmacology, understanding the side effects, understanding the crazy kinetics that these drugs do, and then understanding those drug interactions that may affect care. So it's unfortunately lacking, and we have a system that is very reactive. The patient has to say, hey, I have a side effect, versus how about we reduce that harm first before we prescribe something. So we're doing things a bit inefficiently, and that's why pharmacists are so valuable, but we don't have a system that supports us to do what we can do as best as we can do.
Yeah. So, in general, what are the big concerns in like the landscape of geriatric pharmacology right now?
Good question. So here's the reality. We have a growing, aging landscape that's living longer and I guess relatively healthier since they're staying alive, but we don't have enough care providers to take care of them. And we don't even have enough geriatric doctors that exist. They're about 1% of the medical workforce. And frankly, it's about the same for pharmacists. About 1% are geriatric trained. So when you have more and more people aging and living longer, they're going to likely have more, guess what? Caregiver demands. They're going to have more family looking out for them because they're living longer. And so those caregivers are going to need more time, more money, and energy to figure out how to make sure Granny is good. And in that issue, we have a world where we're seeing more and more people on more and more medications. That's the problem. And so we're not thinking, hey, you've been on this for 20 years. Maybe we should stop. Or maybe grandma really can't take 25 pills. What can we do about getting her down to 10 or 5? And so when we have less people addressing that issue, you're going to have more harm. You're going to have more hospital visits. You're going to have more side effects. You're going to have more falls. You're going to have more caregiver burnout because you're managing all that stuff. You're going to have more caregivers becoming the future aging generation
Right.
because they're burned out
Yeah.
from all their chronic conditions from taking care of their loved ones. So
Hmm.
there's a cyclical issue here that I feel our government is failing to truly address. And on
Hmm.
top of that, we got COVID knocking out the labor shortages here. And this is all compounding an issue that leads to, unfortunately, who is advocating,
Yeah.
who is talking up these issues, who's talking about the drugs. And so that's why I created geriatrics, was to give that voice, but to give anyone the power of knowing, hey, this is probably why your loved ones are falling. This is why their
Hmm.
blood pressures are so low or their blood sugars are uncontrolled. We need to have that specificity,
Hmm.
and we gotta use pharmacists. This is our gift. So that's why I created a business model around just simply serving. Go to the community, go to the churches. And that's why
Hmm.
we met at the caregiver conference,
Yeah.
because it aligns with our mission. And I feel pharmacists are, and in fact, a lot of healthcare professionals are missing out on a boat on the way we can really use patient advocacy and harness that
Yeah.
to empower others.
Absolutely. And giving us permission to ask the question. I think at times we think, okay, if doctor prescribes something, we need to do that or just accept it and not necessarily have to like really play an investigator role, right? Or
Mm,
be, even
right.
as a family member, looking at that and respectfully pushing back or asking some of those questions and
Yeah.
understanding. As caregivers, too, we are not experts in everything. And so to expect that we're going to know every detail about medication and what and how that impacts our loved one is obviously not not feasible.
No.
What's the
Right.
impact on whether it's financial or even health wise? What's the impact due to medication management?
It is egregious, Nicole. In America alone, we have about 750 seniors that are sent to the hospital because of that very same issue, mismanaged medication. So 750 every day.
Wow,
Um, that's a
that's a
lot. And,
lot.
for a lot, and the truth is, we as citizens are the ones paying through our taxes. We're paying Medicare. We're paying for these hospital visits that our patients can't afford. And it's not only a cost prohibitive for our current healthcare model, but it's terrible for the family, right? Who wants to have a prescription refill that you're paying for and then give it to your loved one and it leads to them being in the hospital? Like, that's backwards. So not only is there a burnout on the familial end, but the doctors get dinged because they're not doing their job, or they don't get reimbursed, or the star measures or whatever that their health systems grade them on. But if they get dinged, now they get a double hit. And again, they don't even have the time to see all these people. So there's a cost associated. Of course, we know that there's overall quality of life, there's increased mortality and death, morbidity for our actual patients. Of course, there's more stress. And honestly, there's just lack of fulfillment as a healthcare provider because we're tired of the system sucking. Like,
Yeah.
let's be real. We're tired
Totally.
of this.
Yeah.
We're so tired
Yeah.
and we want to do more, but a lot of our hands are tied because the system just keeps us trapped or confined. So when you talk about the implications, we waste about $530 billion a year from mismanaged medications
It's
in the
devastating.
US.
Yeah.
That's just the US, like just the US. The World Health Organization has ranked
Mm.
medication harm as the top three threat to human existence, like in the world.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think it's in the top 10, but I'm pretty sure it's the
Yeah.
third one. But it's the top 10,
Incredible.
but it's number three. So it's a huge issue.
Hmm.
And honestly, America's behind on the de-prescribing efforts, and we're
Hmm.
just starting to wake up a little bit more to it. But Australia, Canada, Europe, they've been doing it for decades,
Mm.
and we're just starting to wake up. So,
Yeah.
I have hope, but the costs are pretty profound.
Yeah. Oh my word, devastatingly. Yeah. Why are we behind? Why is everyone else ahead of us? I don't know. Oh
Yeah,
man.
it's a good question.
Yeah.
There's a number of reasons. I'm not going to blame it all on the system, but as Americans, we want things fast. We want things now. So we think a pill is the fast and now solution instead of usually trying to get to the root cause of our concerns, right? So a lot of meds are honestly band-aids, and because of that mindset, we come in, we see a commercial. Oh, I want that energy pill. Oh, I want that happy pill instead of doing some of the shadow work or the holistic work or whatever it takes, whether it's exercise, diet, nutrition, thinking you don't have the power to change your course in your health is a cost. And so I think in a way we're in this matrix, we're kind of brainwashed into thinking we have to have all these meds. And I'm again not anti-medicine. I'm just painting the picture of our landscape. So when you have people coming in, hey doc, I saw this new pill, I want it. The doc's like, well, if you want it, whatever. I need to keep my star ratings up. And if I get a check from pharma, that's fine too. But if not, whatever. The patient wants it, want them happy. So there's a cyclical, I barely have the time to do all the right stuff. There's even a lack of hope and providers thinking patients can change their health. So they just say, let's just give you a pill because I assume you're not going to do it anyway. And that's what the problem is. We just think reactively instead of looking at the whole person and looking at their social needs, their community needs, and other barriers that affect your care.
Yeah. We're not giving people enough credit either that there's like that change possible, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We're not.
Okay, so in talking today about over medication and deprescribing, what does that term over medication mean?
Yeah, it's interesting, but essentially it could be the excessive use of, clinical diagnostic testing, or even, of course, over medicating here. It could be a too high of a dose. It could be an inappropriate medication for someone's health conditions. It could be a genetic drug interaction that we may not know unless a genetic test is done, which we offer. So overprescribing really is just the overuse of meds that may no longer be appropriate for someone over 65. And so we tend to get a little pause when people are taking more than five medications. So usually if you keep increasing by fives or 10, 15, 20, there's a significant percentage increase of harm in that loved one. So, it's overprescribing, they say, can have a negative connotation because it puts all the blame on the doctor, but it really just paints the picture of someone just being on too many meds. And sometimes they all may have been appropriate at some point, but is it appropriate now? And that's the question I want everyone to leave is you need to be questioning everything. Like it doesn't matter how long, you need to be wondering what can we do holistically to get you off? If I'm on six blood pressure meds and I've been controlled for 10 years, can we take off one or two? That's the type of dialogue we're trying to have. And that's why I feel overprescribing is it can be addressed not just from the provider end, but from the caregiver end too.
Yeah, and to your point too, as you were talking about, because you have that advanced degree in geriatric pharmacy, and
Correct.
as we age, our bodies change. And so, what might have been our norm how many years ago isn't possibly going to be working well
Right.
with our bodies as we get older. And so, to keep that open all the
Hmm.
time, what do we look for if we, like within our loved ones, that there could be over medication happening? Like, what types of signs are we trying to find?
Yeah, no, I love it. Really, it's gonna first know your loved one's body language and there's just their day to day, right? Know their baseline, know what they're normally like, and then look for any changes in that. And it could be as subtle as an appetite change. It could be being more constipated than usual. It could be mood swings, lack of appetite. It could be increased falls. It could be not being responsive in conversation, like being over sedated, being more tired. So really, it can be literally any change you see physically or mentally in your spouse. It could be how they may communicate. It could be a change there. It could be a medication. It could be causing that. So one thing I don't want people to fall victim to is thinking that just having some memory lapses is a sign of aging. Like it's not. Like you got to make sure we're ruling out if something's causing that or if there may be a health condition that's presenting. So again, I think that comes down to knowing your baseline, knowing your loved ones, what's kind of normal. And then if it's something that if you're urinating 20 times a day and that's normal, that's not exactly normal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
don't just write it off as normal, but
Right.
just question, if and then ask them, how are they feeling? Like, when they take each pill, do they see a difference? Do they feel anything? If it's in a time of day, do they wake up still feeling groggy? There are just subtle things to it. And then there's things that are just obvious, like falls, of course, or just difficulty remembering where they are, constipation, diarrhea, really any change can be attributed to a medication.
Hmm. Yeah, not just accepting that decline is normal, right? It's looking and being curious about what's happening. When we know, I
Yeah.
feel like too, we know, like you were saying, when you know your loved one and you know what their personality is like and how they interact, we can pick up
Mhm.
on those small changes.
For
How
sure.
do we start? Like, where do we begin even making decisions about deprescribing? What does that look
Yeah.
like? And why do we do it? Like, why is that so important?
Yeah, thank you. So, the most important thing in starting this process is getting an accurate and up-to-date medication list. So you want to have everything listed. I don't mean the stuff they've been hoarding in their closet for 5 years.
Yeah.
You want to know everything they're actually taking or what they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be taking, and then include all of the over-the-counter stuff. Do not underestimate natural products, herbals, vitamins, and other over-the-counter meds. They have tons of drug interactions. So you have to let all of them be known to your primary care provider or your community pharmacist. So the first thing, get an accurate med list, keep it somewhere handy, keep it up to date, whether it's in a wallet or an ongoing document you have digitally or in a purse, it doesn't matter, but just keep it handy and keep it accurate. And then you're going to want to look for, yeah, and then this is where you're going to want to consult an expert like myself, or it could be a community pharmacist or your doctor, but you want to see if what they have on their records are even the same. Because I'm going to guarantee you, a lot of the meds are not accurate on the health system side. Like
That's true. I
and in
just
fact,
experienced that. I was like, I'm not taking that. And they
yeah,
had an allergy, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. It's not accurate.
it's not accurate. And don't like go off like a health system's brand name. It's all the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
just a problem with electronic health records. So you want to make sure the med list is updated on the provider end. And then you're going to want to really talk through are all these things needed? And you can do that with your community pharmacist to just do a deep dive if you have a relationship with them. And of course, you can send a message in e-chart with your medical PCP. And what a lot of people don't know is people on Medicare qualify for annual wellness visits, right? And a part of your annual wellness visit is to have a thorough medication review done by your provider. And I don't mean Are you still taking this? Yes, 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 no. Okay. That's not a med review. A med review is a deep dive into each and every drug, each and every dose, each and every health condition that it's supposed to be treating. So it needs to be thorough, and it's ideal to have it done with a pharmacist, but your provider can do that too. And I think the next step is, as we look for potential inappropriate meds, is to continuously rinse and repeat. We're going to do this every time, every 3 to 6 months that you see your doctor. You're going to send messages, and we're going to continuously keep asking, what can we do to get them off this XYZ indefinitely until you're down to a really low number.
There's the term polypharmacy. Where does that live within the conversation we're having today? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's almost synonymous with
Mm-hmm.
overprescribing, but
Okay.
polypharmacy is essentially defined in the literature as taking five or more medications, and it could be someone maybe using two different pharmacies, and they may not realize that there's an interaction and with one pharmacy drug and another. It could be having someone who's on multiple prescribers, right? And five of them are writing stuff that interact and they don't know what the other people are writing. It could be you self-medicating and not realizing your herbals and ibuprofen are interacting with your blood pressure meds or your blood thinners. So polypharmacy can kind of encompass a lot of those scenarios, but generally it's defined as taking five or more meds. And this is in the senior population. It can happen in older and younger adults, but specifically in seniors, they're just more sensitive to those harms. So that's why it's becoming more of a topic of interest.
Yeah, because we hear the term, and it's just nice to understand the framework around it. Because you're right, it does get kind of intermixed in the over medication. I believe I heard you, because your social media, if people don't follow you, they need to, because you do you share so much good info. And I think I remember you referencing, like when you look at your medications, if you do not really need this to live, to like evaluate
Mhm,
that and to go through and
mhm,
ask yourself questions about what we're on and why. Because I think sometimes, like, I think I have a medication. I've just had it prescribed for I don't know how many years, but do I really, really
mhm.
need it? Maybe not,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a method called came out of the VA, and it's a mnemonic called a Vione, Vione, and essentially it's like a shorthand for assessing which meds are truly necessary. And so V stands for vital, I is like important, meaning yeah, it's important for your quality of life, but not like vital to live. O is like, is the medication optional? N is like, is it not necessary, right? And then E is basically making sure every medication you're on has an appropriate health condition. And so this came out from the VA, and they're playing with a couple of models of putting this into more community hands. And that's what I do is I teach this to my clinicians who work with me in my deep prescribing accelerator program. We train people how to use this mnemonic to put it in their communities. And so I encourage everyone to just essentially go through each med and ask, is this vital for me to live? And is it important for my quality of life? If it's not either of those two, it's maybe worth having a conversation around.
Yeah. What medications that we encounter should raise concern for the majority of the population or should raise concern for us? Are some more detrimental to us than others?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that there's a huge opioid epidemic going on, so those should not necessarily be red flags, but they are associated with a lot of harm in an aging population, and they do have an addictive potential. It does not mean if you're in pain and you need a pain med that you can't take it. You just want to be aware that it does have a possibility of leading to substance abuse or it's associated with that. It does not mean everyone who takes an opioid is an addict. That's not true. So there is a lot of stigma with that, particularly in seniors. I'm concerned because one, there are better options to treat people, and two, you're a senior. Like you, it doesn't mean you're not in pain. It just means there are better things to use, and opioids are generally meant to be used acutely, like for short term. They're not truly meant for chronic use, and in fact, they're not really studied unless we're talking like cancer patients or something really extreme in that regard. And so the efficacy isn't nearly there. And the longer you're on it, the more likely you'll be dependent. And that's where some harms come. Another big one are sleep aid medications or anxiety meds. So the benzodiazepines. So those are like Xanax, clonazepam, alprazolam, and a lot of these I'm speaking from the senior lens, not just the general population. So those are also associated with causing respiratory failure, breathing issues, slowing your heart. They're associated with increased car accidents in seniors. So, and of course, falls and fractures. So those are oftentimes people have been on them for years, almost decades, because they were once used for anxiety or occasionally used for sleep, and now they've created a dependence on it. They're pretty hard to get off. They're hard to deprescribe. It does take a lot of time, but it is doable. It just takes a lot of supervision, and that's not something you could stop cold turkey. You have to have a provider oversee that, or you can cause seizures for yourself. So benzos and opioids are probably the big no-nos. I also try to avoid the use of NSAIDs in a lot of our older populations. So those are drugs like ibuprofen, naproxen, Aleve, over-the-counter or prescription, and they have just a ton of side effects and interactions, particularly with blood pressure meds, blood thinning meds. They really upset the stomach. They can increase internal bleeding. So, and they really do interact with a lot of herbal stuff too. So you just want to be careful with those. And if you use them for short term. If you're finding yourself using them all the time, then we're going to want to look for ways to really better manage your pain. So NSAIDs, which stand for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, but basically your ibuprofen, Aleve. In some instances, BC Goodies powder is an NSAID, like it's like a high dose aspirin, and aspirin is technically kind of an NSAID, but even the use of baby aspirin has fallen into question now for the common person who's like, oh, I'll just use it for my heart. Like, no, that data is gone. You don't need to do that unless you have been told you need this, like because you had a stroke or heart attack or something more specific. So those meds all can increase the risk of internal stomach bleeds, which is why, and they can also increase stroke and cardiovascular events or heart attack. So that's why, not aspirin, but the NSAIDs like ibuprofen. So that's why we try to avoid those. There are certain blood pressure medications that can really make people very tired. They could slow the heart rate down so they wake up kind of feeling lack of energy or difficulty breathing. So they're known as beta blockers, and they're really sensitive in our seniors. So that's like metoprolol. Yeah, that's the main one that kind of comes to mind. But there are a number of drugs, but I'd say the ones that give me pause are those pain and sleep ones, and then for me, any antipsychotic or antidepressant is something you want to be very careful with. I don't like antipsychotics in elderly generally. It's usually inappropriate, and it's what knocked my grandmother out. So it's why I always tout that. And so if you see those Seroquels or Abilify or any other family in there, you want to question why they're on it and if
Yeah.
you can slowly taper it.
Yeah. And in senior living communities, especially in memory care with dementia
Yeah.
residents, there is a higher prevalence, I believe, of. I've looked at
Yeah.
medical charts of my residents, and it is that important that we use alternative methods and ways to
Yeah.
work with some of those dynamics versus just that first reaction is I'm going to prescribe something. So, yeah, it's
Exactly.
important to be critical about it. You had also mentioned that the aging population or older adults are the highest consumer of over the counter and is that it? Did I get that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
They're
so
the
they're self-medicating, they're using a lot of those products as well.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're about 14% of the population, and they consume about 33% of all over-the-counter products in our country. So there is a lot of self-medication, and this population doesn't want to, bother the doctor, quote unquote. So they self-medicate and try to treat themselves. So yeah, a lot of those products that seem to be natural or from the earth aren't exactly always safe. So you want to make sure you are getting a quality product if you are, but they do interact. And, the marketing is quite unregulated in that world. So they're gonna do anything that they can legally to deceive you to think it'll work. Like I would get so many questions about, Prevagen and preserving memory. And it's like, no, it's not gonna do much for you, and it's expensive. And there was an association of having strokes with it. So they had to like take it off the market and reformulate it because of that issue. So you just want to always just ask your pharmacist if this is truly going to work for me before you make a kind of purchase like that, and then try to see if it interacts with anything on your medication list on your profile.
That's good advice. How are you hopeful and what are you seeing as growing improvement in this space?
Yeah, so my mission is to make deprescribing synonymous with pharmacists. And so I pride myself on leading a movement of deprescribing advocates. We've got social workers, gerontologists, pharmacists, nurses, and doctors who are leaving the fold and finding new ways to treat people a bit holistically. So I'm hopeful because I see it. I see tons of different people creating their own niche and really serving people in a non-traditional way. So with further education, will lead to further, community questioning about it, and then there'll be more policy change down the road. And we have some policies that are already changing. We've got the National Committee on Quality Assurance, which makes the basically the measures for nursing homes and these facilities.
Yeah, I remember in those meetings, and we'd go through our QI meetings where
Yeah,
we'd look at medications, right, and evaluate and all. Yeah, absolutely. That's good to
yeah,
hear.
yeah. So yeah, they're now passing laws or policy to track deprescribing efforts for benzodiazepines and for insulin, which sometimes is associated with falls or low sugar, which can lead to hospitalization. So they're looking for ways now in policy. So I am very hopeful because if they're making that standard, we're going to see more of the health systems follow suit.
You are starting a movement, and it's been fun to see how that has grown. Just witnessing from the outside, I can definitely
Yeah.
sense that there's that momentum. So I'm super excited for you and for our families and older adults and professionals. I mean, everybody involved. And you work with people in different ways, right? You've got the professional side, and I want you to share about that. And then I also want you to share how you work with families and older adults and caregivers, because I think it's all so important.
Yeah, so I mean, the meat and potatoes of what I do is I create prescribing action plans for families who are worried about their loved ones' meds. So I do a thorough med review. I look for opportunities to deprescribe, and then I create an action plan based on your genes. So I do genetic testing for everyone, just to make sure there isn't anything genetically we may be missing. So in doing so, you get all this access, and then you get an action plan that you can give to your provider and say, hey, we talked to Dr. DeLon, geriatric pharmacist. This is his philosophy on where we think we can do these meds. And you essentially are now empowered and have the education around, how to better use these meds. And if not, better use your lifestyle to get off some of these meds. So we really do things holistically. We look for those social barriers for care. We help people get enrolled with grants and foundations to help with patient assistance for paying for some of those meds. Yeah, so we really go to bat for our patients one-on-one. And then now further, what I've done is I've taught or I'm teaching clinicians how to do what I do one-on-one for their businesses or for their care models. So I've created a course called the Prescribing Accelerator. And it's a year-long access, but you're taught for 3 months, and we get pioneers who are looking to roll out prescribing as a service, as a business model. And so, in using these one on one consultations, it could be done through educating, a nursing association, or going to a nursing home, or just going to your church or your community and talking about prescribing and leveraging your expertise. That is intended for pharmacists, nurses, doctors, social workers, PAs, and nurse providers, nurse practitioners. So, that's more clinical focused. But people are leaving with all the tools, all the tricks, all the secrets, all the things that other countries are doing to talk about deprescribing and can leave with a monetizable revenue stream. So that's my passion, is getting more people fired up about this. So again, that's why I'm hopeful, because my cohorts, they're doing the damn thing. They're doing the work. They're getting out of the community. They're serving. They're getting their passion back for their profession. So my model is, for patient caregivers and families, and it's for clinicians looking to do the same thing. But also I do education all the time. I do public speaking, education, I do webinars, I do talks. So there are a number of ways I've expanded my reach to empower people to make the right call.
Yeah, you're the perfect person for it because your energy is so good and you connect well and you can share and articulate in ways that, someone like myself who doesn't have that background, like I get it, I understand it. So I'm so thankful for your work, and the holistic and evidence-based approach is vital. And it's important as we, I think, as a culture too, are wanting more alternative treatments and looking at the whole lifestyle and how we can be effective in managing our health and all of it. So this has been really fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.